Hello again! I'm here to do another fanfic, one which, if I said I haven't been looking forward to reading this one, I would be lying entirely. Today I will be starting Applejack and Rainbow Dash Go to White Castle by Han Valen. So, here we go. Chapter 1, Sodium Chloride. Author's note: don't take this story seriously. At all. Applejack and Rainbow Dash Go to White Castle. Chapter 1, Sodium Chloride. The summer afternoon was very slowly descending into dusk in Ponyville, and most residents were just finishing up their day's work. It was around 4 now, and the sun had just started sinking from its high noon position. Even though work was over, for most, the day was not, and most ponies went straight from work to another fun activity. One Pegasus pony in particular was taking a nap during this time. Though to be fair, she had been napping since noon on a cloud above the small town. She was invisible to the eyes from below, curled up cozily with the warm sun warming her light blue pelt and rainbow-colored mane and tail. Only another Pegasus would be able to spot the one known as Rainbow Dash, but they wouldn't do anything to wake her prematurely, lest be on her blacklist for approximately the rest of the time she was awake since then. She would clock said pony back onto their neutral list once she got more shut-eye later, probably. But as the workday had ended and the rest of the day carried on, Rainbow stirred in a timely fashion, taking her sweet time to wake up. She rubbed her eyes and yawned, then stretched while still sprawled on the plush surface of her small cloud. She laid there for a few extra minutes until she had fully awoken. When she finally drew up the will, she got to her hooves, yawning again and stretching her wings. She flapped them a couple of times to limber them up and shook her head. At last she let out a gusting sigh of contentedness, flicking her tail before jumping right off the cloud. As she rushed to the ground, she beat her wings to slow her descent until she touched down in Ponyville Square with a light clop of hooves. "Hey, Rainbow Dash," a familiar voice called out from behind her. She smiled lightly and turned to regard Scootaloo as the young orange filly rolled up to her on her scooter. The youngster beamed back at her idol. "Hey, Squirt, how's it hanging?" Dash said. "Great," she replied giddily. "Me and the other Crusaders tried out, She trailed off suddenly, her cheerful mood turning sheepish. Rainbow tilted her head inquisitively. "Tried what out?" she pressed. Apparently Scootaloo had gotten so caught up in her excitement of seeing Rainbow Dash she had forgotten her crusading hadn't gone as well as she had said a moment ago. 1 second. Which wasn't much of a surprise, but Rainbow Dash had half a mind to not say that out loud. Today, at least. She murmured quietly, almost as inaudible as Fluttershy. "Cutie Mark Crusader trust falling." Rainbow blinked at the bashful filly as she looked away from Rainbow, kicking a foreleg back and forth lightly as it hung over the edge of her scooter. Rainbow couldn't contain herself. She started laughing. Scootaloo blushed deeply and shrank a little, while Rainbow had seen she had embarrassed her even more. She did her best to stifle her laughter. Mostly successful, not completely. "Sorry, Squirt," she said between giggle fits. You just had a bad brainstorming day. You might come up with something way more awesomer tomorrow." Scootaloo brightened up considerably at her idol's optimism. "You're not just saying that, are you?" she asked, but smiled honestly anyways. Heck, you might even get your cutie mark before the sun sets," Rainbow went on, furthering Scootaloo's rising mood. "I might. Oh, idea! I gotta go. Catch you later, Rainbow Dash," Scootaloo cried, beating her little wings rapidly and kicking off with her scooter, causing a small dust cloud to rise in her wake. Rainbow beat her own wings to clear the dust as she watched the filly zoom away with a smile. Post-noon nap off to a good start. Post-noon nap off to a good start. Rainbow jumped back into the air again to fly for Sweet Apple Acres. Tonight she and Applejack were going to hang out for a special treat. Just the two of them. Smiling excitedly, she sped up, shooting over the straw thatched roofs of the rural town, the distant farm rapidly getting closer. In a little less than a minute, she was going right over their barn and over the orchards where Applejack was no doubt still working somewhere. Now, AJ didn't usually quit her apple bucking until the sun was orange, but it was these nights with Rainbow that she made the exception. Her family all knew this by now, and of course let her get away with it. After all, she worked extremely hard the rest of the time. They even listened to her when she forbade any of the family to interrupt hers and Rainbow's hangout time unless it was an emergency. And a damn good emergency. Rainbow spotted Big Macintosh down below first among the trees, just finishing loading up the last bucket of apples into a cart. Rainbow hovered down towards the big red draft pony. "Hey, Big Mac," she called. He glanced at her and smiled. "Evening, Rainbow Dash. Wondering where AJ's at?" he asked, knowing the answer anyways. "Yup," she replied with a teasing grin. He gave a chuckle and nodded in the direction off in the distance where the trees covered rising and falling hills. Okay. Up in the northwest section or where thereabouts. I'm gonna have to grab or load this time, aren't you? Probably. Catch you later, Mac. With that, Rainbow zoomed off. I think I got that sentence wrong. Oh well. Zoomed off in the general direction of Applejack's location, leaving Big Macintosh to hinge himself to his cart and haul it off to the barn. It didn't take much longer for Dash to find her friend. All she had to listen for were the sounds of hind hooves slamming on bare bark until she located the bucking mare, surrounded by filled buckets of apples. Rainbow Dash touched down a ways from her friend and cantered up to the earth pony. "Hey, Applejack," she called out. She looked in the direction of the voice and smiled when she saw Rainbow approaching. "Well, hey there, Sugar Cube," she greeted. "Y'all ready for our little shindig tonight?" she asked, grinning playfully. Rainbow returned the smile. "You bet your flank I'm ready," she proclaimed enthusiastically, then asked in a more hushed tone as if somebody would overhear. "So, where'd it come from this time?" Applejack grinned mischievously at this question. Straight from the Gulf of Mexico." "Whoa!" Rainbow Dash cried, rearing back from Applejack as if she had suddenly burst into flames. "Applejack, that stuff's expensive. Did you put a mortgage on the farm or something?" Applejack chuckled and rolled her eyes. What are they talking about? Drugs? Oh, well, no, wait, duh. I'm sure that's exactly what they're talking about now that I think about it. "Oh, don't get your tail in a wad, Rainbow Dash. I only got enough for the night. All I did was save some bits for myself from sales this week and got a small order for it." Let me see," Rainbow urged enthusiastically, bouncing slightly on her knees. "Y'all just hold your horses. It looks like any other salt." AJ grinned and revealed a small baggie of cubed white morsels. So are they talking about sugar cubes? Some of them cracked at the edges, loose grains littering the very bottom of the bag. "Here you go, the finest Mexican sea salt the world's got to offer. We're gonna be in for a treat tonight, Sugar Cube." Oh, okay, that makes perfect sense now. I like what you did there. That's pretty tricky. Salt. Then let's ditch this load of horse apples and get to the shack, Rainbow urged, jumping in the air, spreading her wings and grabbing Applejack's tail between her teeth. The only word of protest Applejack was capable of before Rainbow Dash went full throttle in the direction of the shack was, "Whoa!" Sea salt, sea salt, sea salt, sea salt. What's to say about refined sea salt? Well, first off, regular salt consumed in pure doses can knock a pony off his flank in no time. Well, really depends on how good you can hold your sodium. Salt bars are plentiful in western Equestria, and also a little bit in greater Equestria. But sea salt, being on a whole different level way above regular salt, is consumed by ponies worldwide. Although most lands legalize pony use of sea salt, there's always been stigma about the use of it in certain countries. Equestria was one such country, not necessarily by the government alone, but by the ponies themselves. Although concern over the matter has been lax in these modern days, and there have been talks of even legalizing it so many other free world pony countries around the globe, still, some are steadfast in their approach of the product and won't let it be legalized without a fight. Thus, one can still be in much trouble for even the possession of refined sea salt. But come on, two ponies at the ass end of an old apple orchard in a rundown shack. Said ponies are just also happen to represent two elements of harmony, one of them honesty. Who's gonna think they're up to no good in that rundown old shack that they had just snuck into, giggling quietly like school fillies talking about colts right behind their backs? The shack was a one-roomed building made of old plywood covered by ridge teen sheets, which were mostly rusted and dirty. And the one window next to the wooden door was grimy and nigh impossible to see through. I think that might be supposed to be near impossible. I think it's just nay impossible to see through. But on the inside, it was surprisingly cozy, albeit still a bit dusty. Two old beanbags made of musty fabric sat in front of the battery-powered transistor radio. But there was even a tiny wood burning stove that could warm the place up in no time. Applejack flicked a match, and lit up an oil lamp that hung above the stove, grabbing it from its hook in her teeth and placing it near hers and Rainbow Dash's seat in front of the radio. Dash flicked on the radio, the dial already set to their usual station, set on their usual salty station, as they called it. They actually hadn't picked this particular night at random either for their sea salt sessions. Tonight was the night certain radio frequency broadcasted a live comedy variety show, A Past Your Home Companion. What's better than listening to A Past Your Home Companion every Saturday night? Listening to Past Your Home Companion every Saturday night while getting high with one of your best friends. Yeah, you got quite a point there. They had missed the intro of the show, but currently the host was just starting his short routine. Dash and Applejack always got a hoot from that guy. Well, they got a hoot out of all the other members of the show as well. "Boy, howdy, y'all ready for this?" Applejack asked, offering 6 cubes of sea salt in her hoof to Rainbow Dash. "Ready?" Rainbow Dash asked. "Ready doesn't even fucking describe it." "Yee-haw!" Applejack concurred animatedly, bro hoofing Rainbow with her free hoof. Rainbow took her share of the sea salt and didn't hesitate to pop 1 cube in her mouth, letting the hardened sea salt melt on her tongue. The effect was gradual but amazing, especially with this Mexican sea salt. That's really hard to say. Straight out of the Gulf of Mexico. The host was already funny, but he was even funnier to the now completely salted ponies that laughed with each other. Currently, he was telling a little story about his youth in Hoofington. Meanwhile, Mr. Hall was still trying to pull that old rusty plow across the rocky soil. And you can imagine a big draft pony like him would have no problem pulling that thing, even with a few rocks in the soil. But this is Hoofington. Hoofington soil can be a prime excavation site for spas that have saunas. The audience laughed over the radio. That's not even that funny. And AJ and Rainbow Dash laughed, and AJ and RD laughed even harder in their salty states. It's so true. I've seen it before, Rainbow proclaimed, her lips crusted with leftover sea salt grains. Meanwhile, the host continued, the cows in the pen next to the field he was trying to till were watching him try to pull that plow through the especially rocky soil. And I was off on the other side of the field with my brother, who, like I said, always wanted to be a workhorse like all the other farmer ponies outside of town. So to him, watching a big strong stallion like Mr. Hall was the closest thing to going to a movie theater we had. Yeah. But, wait, who's talking? Okay. But the difference between he and I was that he was impressed and I was just amused. I could watch old Mr. Hall try to fight that rocky soil all day. Then I realized, if my brother became a farmer like Mr. Hall was, then I could watch him fight rocky soil all day. And being that he was my brother, I could actually laugh out loud at him. Rainbow Dash and Applejack snickered. But as I said earlier, my parents had high expectations for him, and understandably so, because my brother was the smartest guy in town. Out of every young stallion in town, he had the highest probability of enrolling in the Princeton University of San Fran Bronco. Very nice. But he didn't want to do that, and I didn't want him to so that I could watch him farm. So I hatched a scheme. Now, I was a good colt. Everyone always remarked on how well-behaved and polite I was. No one would expect me to try and tamper with the forms of my brother had filled out for Princeton. Now, he has this odd code of honor. Whenever our parents asked him to do something, he would always try to do it better than expected. He was considered a good colt like I was. So the prospect of him trying to flunk his admissions form on purpose to one of the most prestigious universities in Equestria was like him slapping Mom and Pop in their faces with his tail, which I had done once, and it didn't end well. So imagine if their reactions if he did it. Damn cold, I can't get past this frickin' thing. But the funny thing about his code of honor was that he couldn't do anything to break it himself. But if somebody else were to tamper with his duties, what was fine? That, I'm assuming he meant that was fine, as long as he didn't know about the tampering in question. So I decided to take advantage of his honorable loophole and tamper with his Princeton forms, so he would be rejected. Mom and Pop might be disappointed at it, but they would get over it. And my brother would be more than happy to see a big fat red stamp, rejected. He spoke in a deep voice into the microphone. Over the form, because rejected meant he would have to get a full-time job in Hoofington. He could work for Mr. Hall and learn how to farm, and then when he was old enough and experienced enough, he could have his own farm. And when he tried to plow those rocky fields in spring, I could stand off to the side and laugh out loud at him. But I was a colt, and a foolish one at that. And unbeknownst to myself, I had been explaining my entire scheme right to my honorable brother out loud. When I had realized I had spilled my innards to him, I looked in his direction and saw the face I was expecting to see. Agape and aghast, as if I had confessed my, at the time, crush on my school teacher. I knew that he would say once the shock. I knew what he would say once the shock wore off. So I said to him I was going to do it anyway so he could stay and be a farmer, and I turned to walk back home without an argument. That was when I walked straight into my father's big, muscular, swelling chest, and I looked up at him, and he glowered down at me like I was a dying rat. And then he turned a softer gaze to my brother and said, "Son, do you really want to not join Pranston so you can be a farmer here?" And being honest to his old man, he said, "Yes." And Pop nodded and said back, "Then that's your decision as your own stallion." And then I laughed at the dumbfounded expression on my brother's face. And then Pop looked at me next, and I became a dying rat again. Needless to say, by the end of the day, I had a red ruler mark on my backside, and then as further punishment, Mom and Pop ordered me to spend the rest of the spring time helping Mr. Hall in his rocky field with his plow, and my brother watched all season long with an amused smile on his face. When he finished the story, the audience erupted in applause, mingled with laughter. Applejack and Rainbow Dash continued their laughter as well, clinging to each other as they shared in their favorite show. "Man, this guy is the best," Dash cackled. "You're darn tootin'," AJ agreed full-heartedly. This carried on for 2 hours, and it never got old. The silly stories, the skits, the country music, even the commercials were done in real time by the host and other members, even with their own little jingles. They actually made commercials bearable. But soon they were drawing near to the end of the show, and the sea salt was slowly beginning to wear off of Applejack and Rainbow Dash. Now they laid on their cushions quietly, simply staring at the radio as the host gave them this episode its farewell. And before we go, folks, allow me to let one of our sponsors have the last word in edgewise. Tonight we won't be able to show you our fine performances without the support of White Castle Mini Sandwich Restaurant in Canterlot. Fun-sized sandwiches made with wholesome homemade breads of all sorts of flavors. Rosemary garlic onion with your choice of filling. He said, and like that, AJ and RD's stomachs began to growl, and they sat up straight, staring at the radio intently. All forms of filling including, but are not limited to, dandelions, freshly harvested hay, subtly flavorful lemongrass, all customizable with a plethora of sweet fruits and scrumptious vegetables. White Castle, located in Canterlot on Main Street, next to the Pier 2 Imports, marathon morsels for an epic meal. Rainbow flicked off the radio, wide-eyed and amazed. She looked at her friend, and Applejack returned the same look, and in their eyes, behind the shock and awe, was something very clear. Hunger. "I'll tell you what, after that little spiel, I'm hankering for a table full of those little White Castle sandwiches," Applejack said to Rainbow Dash as they walked out of the shack and into the slowly waning light. It was dusk now, the long July days not getting completely dark until around 8:30. The back orchards of Sweet Apple Acres were hued orange by the setting sun, long shadows cast along the grassy ground beneath the swaying trees, these shadows dancing as a light breeze rustled the treetops. These particular apple trees surrounding the mares wouldn't be ripe and ready for bucking until fall came around. Rainbow glanced back at the light orange earth pony as they walked side by side back to the farm's main buildings. You thinking what I'm thinking?" she asked with a growing grin. Applejack returned it. "You bet your sweet behind I am, Sugar Cube. Told you so just a moment ago, didn't I?" she joked. Rainbow chuckled. "Let's get a move on," Rainbow proclaimed, and took off at a run, Applejack quick to keep up. In their sea-salted states, it did not cross Rainbow Dash's mind that she could outfly Applejack, and it didn't cross Applejack's mind that she still had work to do tomorrow, and yet they were heading straight for an hours-long trip to Canterlot for sandwiches. But those modes of thoughts might as well be banished to the moon tonight. They were interrupted by an unexpected visitor anyway. Rainbow, having glanced behind her to get a peek at the rapidly approaching Applejack, looked where she was going again in time to skid to a halt in front of a startled teenage colt. He gave a yelp and jumped back from the just as startled Rainbow Dash. Applejack slowed to a halt with Dash. "Carmel, what are you doing here?" Dash asked, staring at the bewildered colt in surprise. "Oh, not much. I was just hanging out with Big Mac earlier," he replied. But even in their sea-salted states, the two mares could tell that he was nervous and hiding something. They glanced at each other, and Carmel took that as a sign that they were suspicious, in which he'd be right in the assumption. "So, yeah, I'm gonna meet Big Mac back at the barn to lift some weights with him," he said to the mares, backing away from them slowly. "Y'all don't lift Carmel," Applejack pointed out. His ears slunk back as he glanced around, as if hoping something in the orchards would jump out and save him. "Well, I am learning, yeah," he said quickly, stumbling slightly as a hind hoof got caught on a tree root. "What the hay has gotten into you, Carmel?" Rainbow demanded, making him shrink further. "You're acting like we're robbers." "Now hold on just a cotton-picking minute," Applejack suddenly exclaimed. Carmel froze on impulse. Even though he wanted to turn tail and bolt, Applejack came up to his muzzle and sniffed. A familiar smell drifted from him. She could even see what was on his lips. When he noticed she had spotted the sea salt grains on the left side of his lips, he quickly licked them up and grinned sheepishly. I got it for medicinal purposes," he lied poorly. It was at this point AJ and Dash realized they could have a little bit of fun with this, and they smirked knowingly at each other before facing Carmel again. "Oh, really?" Applejack pressed. "A young stallion like you got arthritis already?" He scowled of all things. He always became annoyed when age was brought into the question. "No, you're only 5 years older than me, AJ." "No, and you're only 5 years older than me, AJ," he reported. "Then why the medicinal sea salt if you don't have any problems?" Dash inquired. There's always Zakora, too, you know," she added, doing her best to keep a poker straight face. Amazingly, under the influence she was, she held a good poker face. Though arguably, since Carmel was just as salted as they were, he couldn't have been able to properly read through Dash's most likely poorly constructed poker face. "Well, oh yeah," he proclaimed, as if remembering something that had been bugging him for the last hour. "I got it because," he struggled, "because I'm going to be weightlifting with Big Mac." Rainbow and Applejack just stared at him blankly. Yeah, that it's a preemptive measure. If I get hurt while lifting, the pain won't be so bad." That's not how preemptive medicine works. They stared for another moment, then glanced at each other, then burst into hysterical laughter. Carmel watched in bemusement as they fell onto the grass, rolling around as tears streamed from their eyes. Rainbow flailed her hooves spasmodically while Applejack lay on her belly, beating the grass with a forehoof as she cackled with her friend. They didn't even notice as Big Mac himself came up beside Carmel and watched the mares with his usual deadpan expression. "Yup," he said flatly at the sight of them, and that seemed to catch Applejack's attention. "Oh, hey, big brother," she said, getting to her hooves. "I think Carmel here has came to see you." "I know, AJ. I've been with him for the last hour, he replied. Rainbow had stood now, and both hers and Applejack's smiles began to fade. You have? Applejack asked. Yup. But Carmel got high on sea salt. Oh, shit. There we go. To Rainbow's and Applejack's surprise, Carmel and Mac exchanged amused glances with each other, then looked back at the mares, waiting for their reactions expectantly. Applejack stared in disbelief as it slowly dawned on her what was going on. Oh, no way, Big Macintosh. You? She cried incredulously. He finally gave a few deep chuckles. Yep, he replied brightly, smiling gaudily. Applejack was at a loss for words. Even so was Rainbow Dash, which was unlike the very opinionated mares. We know what you two do in the shack too, Carmel added. Their jaws dropped. Anyways, Big Mac said, turning away, I promised Carmel I'd give him some pointers on weightlifting. So you two have a good evening together. Carmel gave them a farewell smile before trotting after Big Macintosh, leaving the mares to stand and stare at them until they disappeared in the throng of apple trees. They stood there for a long while, trying to digest the new information in which they had just swallowed. A minute later, Applejack shook her head and began to laugh a little again. That rascal. Oh well. As long as Granny Smith and Apple Bloom don't find out. Rainbow chuckled. Yeah. Anyways, let's head out. Should take us about an hour to Canterlot. The skewed perceptions of sea-salted ponies. On average, it was 2 hours or more to Canterlot at a consistent trot. But their little trip to their desired eatery would be more than just a walk in the park. Nice pun. Alright, well, that is the end of the first chapter. And yeah, I'm going to end it there. So, yeah. Stuff like that. Yep.